Good. All right, everybody. Thank you for coming to my talk, Wile E Agile and Catching Up with Quality. First things first, a little about me. Let's just get this out of the way. Yes, my first name is Johnson. Usually have a lot of hang-ups about that. My dad's name is John, and so I am John's son. They thought it would be fun to name me like a Viking. So I started manual testing. My first job out of college. That's how I got into software. If you're familiar with the medical software field, I worked at Epic, which is a big name in that space. I picked up Ruby and test automation along the way, and eventually became the lead test engineer at Manta, which is really what this talk is about. Currently, I'm a test engineering consultant at Cardinal Solutions. It's a great place to work. You should check out their booth. And maybe most importantly, I miss that beard so much. It's just not the same without it. So, name of my talk, Wile E Agile. I like to make this comparison a lot. Quality software is like the roadrunner, and the project teams trying to achieve quality software are like the coyote. We share a lot of similarities. It often feels like we're really, really close, but we never quite get there. We come up with these crazy, kind of hackish, kind of hard to sustain solutions to catch that thing. And if you can tell, I don't know if you can read that little font there, the Latin name for roadrunner is Disappearus Quicius, and I can't think of a better name in Latin for quality software than that. So yeah, we are the coyote, and we all know how that goes. It really sucks to be the coyote. Things don't typically work out for him. So for us, that looks like headaches, heartbreaks, and buggy software. So the coyote is not all bad. There's a lot of traits that are good in the coyote and that are good in us as project teams. First of all, we come up with these creative ideas that are smart in their own way, sure. We have smart people, or at least we hope we do. And of course, there's no lack of motivation when it comes to wanting to deliver quality software. Sometimes we'll run through steel walls to get there. So I'm a test engineer. This talk is going to be a little bit focused on test engineering, and we're kind of going to look at it from that angle. I kind of break down feedback and the feedback that I try to give into this acronym. It's corny, but easy to remember, so please bear with me. Rate, regression, acceptance, tracking, exploring. Regression, acceptance, tracking, exploring. Don't worry, I'll go over it again. So regression, if you don't know what that is, I hope you do, but if you don't, it's checking that you didn't break things that you weren't currently working on. It's the biggest time sink for a test engineering team because there's so much to cover, and it really needs to be executed with every commit of code. And if you're doing this manually, I apologize. I've been there. It sucks. But it can get better, so stick with it. Acceptance, what that looks like, important stuff. Building the right thing and building it so it works correctly. Tracking, not just tracking bugs like you think, but who committed what, what's in the test environment, what's in staging, what's going to be deployed tomorrow at noon again. And then, of course, bug tracking is a part of it. What the hell is wrong with this thing? And exploring. This is, the best thing about testing software, and yet it's often the most overlooked thing. How can I break our application in unexpected ways? Because we know users are going to do that, despite all our efforts. So rate, just once again, regression, acceptance, tracking, exploring. So like I said, this story is really about Manta. Manta is an online directory for small businesses. It gets a web application, about 30 million unique visitors a month. It's a collection of Java services and Angular front end, and it's a pretty great place to work. Manta was, when I got there a long time ago, a monolithic Perl application. I hope I saw some of you cringe. And it was an okay place to work. There was a lot of strife. The culture was hit or miss. Obviously, there was a transformation, both technological and procedural, and also cultural. The development life cycle is what I would call agile-ish. I'm sure you're all familiar with some kind of agile-ish SDLC. We did the sprints, 2-week sprints. We had our daily stand-ups in the morning before we got to work or did our work. We worked on story cards. On the surface, it very much looked like an agile shop. We were definitely paying our lip service to agile. We were deploying once per week, roughly, although about a third of those deployments would be rolled back to be fixed because it broke something drastically in production. And we had an automated regression script or suite that we manually kicked off, so there was no continuous integration. So what was it like working in the old way? It was not great, as you probably can imagine. We were doing okay, probably a little less than okay, but we'll say okay. Meeting deadlines, we were able to meet deadlines, but always felt like we were never going to meet the deadline. I'm sure some of you are familiar with that feeling. There was not a lot of confidence in what we were developing, despite developing a lot of stuff. We were churning out a lot of code, but we didn't feel great about it. I would also call this the Wild West delivery model. And nothing sums that up than the feeling like every hiccup is a wildfire. That definitely is the Wild West delivery model. So what did our rate feedback look like in the old Manta way? As you probably can guess, it wasn't very great. Regression testing was a Cucumber JVM suite. We had product owner input on our test scenarios, so we had that communication there, which was good. We tested everything, or we were supposed to test everything. There were definitely gaps. They were manually kicked off, like I said, so no continuous integration. And fragile, hard to maintain, broke a lot and often. And because of that, that didn't inspire a lot of confidence as a test engineering team. And so we ended up manually spot checking a lot of those regression scripts just to make sure that nothing was broken. So what did acceptance look like in the old Manta way? Story cards, we had those, but they were huge. They encompassed really large features. Those features were in branches. We did Git, and those Git branches would be open for 2, 3, 4 weeks at a time before they got merged back into master. And acceptance testing was 100% the test team's responsibility. Tracking. Oh, tracking at Manta back then. Which VM is the bug fix in again? It's in that VM with 4 other bug fixes. Okay, so now we have to figure out whose code broke that VM because it's not working. What's being deployed on Thursday? No one really knows. I guess we'll just see when it goes out. And who knows if it'll work? We'll probably roll back. Our bug tracking system had 1,500 bugs in it. Bugs, I'd put in quotation marks. It kind of acted as like a weird backlog bug hybrid. But regardless, there were 1,500 cards in there. And surprisingly, there was almost 0 tester involvement in tracking at that time. We wrote bug cards, and maybe we tracked that individual bug card, so when it got fixed, we turned around and double check that, but that was all our involvement included. So exploring, what do you think exploring looked like at Manta? It was completely non-existent. There was no exploratory testing. We simply had no time. We had to test those giant features in those giant feature branches. We had to, run the regression suite and wait for it to stop running and double check the false failures because there were always going to be false failures. So this is what it kind of felt like being a tester on Manta at that time. Obviously we were not working on a solid foundation, and we felt like it could bite us in the ass at any moment. And worst of all of this is we were totally in charge of quality. It was the worst term in the world, quality assurance, applied to our two-man team. That's just not a great way to do things. So obviously, this was not working for us. We did not like it. We saw the writing on the wall. We knew things had to change. Lucky for us, at that time, Manta decided that they wanted to re-platform the entire technology stack. We wanted to go from a monolithic Perl application to a service-oriented architecture with modern technologies. Sorry if I offended any of Perl enthusiasts who might be in the audience. See, there's always one. So we're going to do this re-platform of the technology. The test team, it also included developers and product as well. We took a step back and said, there's no better time to also re-platform the way we do processes at Manta, the way we do feedback at Manta. So we were able to reprocess feedback from scratch at Manta. That was the opportunity we were given. I can't overstate how awesome an opportunity that is. If you ever get the chance to do something like that, take it immediately and run with it. So the idea was, how could we reimagine the way we do this feedback? What does the perfect feedback look like for us and our team? And maybe most importantly, is how do we keep from becoming that coyote again? So speed, well, we wanted to be fast, but speed was never really the issue. We were deploying once a week. I mean, that's pretty fast. So the Wild West development or delivery model was fast for us, but the key was control, right? We wanted to be fast. We wanted to be under control, though. So we went small. Small was the idea that we took and we ran with. Fast is important, but small is so much more important because small is inherently fast unless you go out of your way to make it slow if you were to do that for some reason. Small is also controlled and it's focused. We definitely wanted our feedback to be small and concise and focused like that. My dad is a basketball coach, and he often said the statement, fast but under control with the ball. When I played for him, it annoyed the crap out of me, and yet here I am in front of a theater of people talking about fast but under control. Luckily, he'll never watch this, so he would be insufferable if he saw me admit to that. So what did the rate feedback look like in our heads as like what we wanted ideally? Well, we don't want to test everything. We don't want to do a full regression test. We want a smoke test. And smoke test to us meant testing the core functionality and the stuff that is commonly broken. The things that are super key to the business and the stuff that we knew developers messed up a lot. We wanted to automate like users use the application. That seems like common sense, but if you were to go and look at most regression test suites now, I feel like a lot of them don't do that. I have this anecdote. We had a register page on Manta's web application that did client-side validation of the password. So if you had too weak a password, we wouldn't even let you submit that to the server. The client would say, hey, this is too weak. So that's fine. We had a test for that automated. It correctly caught it. We had a bug, though, where if you fix that in the password field and you made your password stronger and you went to go submit, well, the client validation never let go of that error. So you had to refresh the page to resubmit your registration form. If we had done a normal isolated state regression test suite, we would have opened the browser, tested the negative test case against the password, closed the browser, opened the browser again, tested the normal path for the password, and never caught that bug. And it would have been a terrible user experience for someone who's out there trying to register on manta.com. That's just simply not how users would use the application. Maybe your 90-year-old grandma in IE6 would close the browser and try again, but a normal user would not. And then maybe the most radical thing we want to do here is we want to do all of this testing in less than 10 minutes. We had an internal hardline goal 10 minutes, that's as fast as you could be. And actually, that's kind of high. I always strive for 6 minutes or less. If that seems crazy, I'll talk a little bit more about it later. So acceptance testing in our ideal situation for Manta, we wanted to break it down into small chunks. Again, small is best. And that's kind of a core piece of the Agile methodology, right? Is you work on smaller things so you can work quicker. And so we want to continue that. We wanted so that anyone could do acceptance testing. And maybe more importantly, we wanted to put the responsibility of acceptance testing on the consumer of the functionality that's being developed. So for an API functionality that's being developed, the consumer is probably a front-end developer. They're the ones who's going to use that development, right? So he or she is the one who is responsible for acceptance testing of that API development. If we're doing some kind of large feature that's going to be seen by the public, that responsibility ultimately falls on the product owner. And we would only automate this acceptance criteria if we felt like it was core to the business. If it fit into that smoke testing functionality or that smoke testing mind frame. And a thing you want to look at here is, maybe you're releasing a giant new feature that's going to be very visible on your site. That's probably core to your business in its first 6 months, but maybe 6 months from now it's not so core. Pull it out of your smoke test because it's not that important to your business. Tracking, what did tracking look like? Well, we wanted to do away with branches at all. We used to have those giant feature branches. We said, no, let's work out a master. Now, that comes with the caveat of paired programming. If you pair with someone, you can work out a master and just go. If you, for whatever reason, didn't want to pair, you do a branch, but you should be committing that branch back to master in like less than half a day. We wanted to continuously integrate, and so every push to master went through the whole testing cycle. That helped track it along the way. And hand in hand with that is we wanted to continuously deliver that code from environment to environment. So keeping track of what's in the test environment, what's in the staging environment is really easy when you can just look at, hey, did the test pass? Well, then it's in the staging environment now. We stopped writing bug cards, period. No more bug cards. If that seems crazy, I'll talk on that a little bit later. And then the last piece of any continuous delivery model is move code to production as quickly as possible. So we didn't do continuous deployment, so we weren't automating deployment straight from staging to production, but it was just a one-button click away whenever we felt like it was ready to go. So exploring, we obviously wanted to do exploratory testing. We just never had time for it in the old way. But with such little regression testing, since we're only doing the smoke test suite, this becomes absolutely necessary. You have to have eyes on your application. You can't just rely on automation. Exploratory testing should be done by anyone and everyone. Ideally, maybe you're working on an application you dog food it. You use it to make the application. That's a fantastic situation to be in from an exploratory standpoint. Otherwise, you should just have business people, marketing guys, developers, testers. They should all be in the app just to check out, the newest feature or whatever, just so they have an idea about what's going on. And in this new feedback model, testers finally have time to do exploratory testing, which is a very important piece in what we ultimately wanted to achieve. So surprise, feedback actually has a new part in our reimagined rate system maintenance. So it's really easy for regression test suites, the big ones with 3,000 tests that run overnight over the course of 4 hours, to get giant and unwieldy, hard to maintain, obviously. We didn't want that to happen, but it's just as easy to happen. It will happen just as easily to a test suite with 40 tests as it will with one with 400 tests. 10-minute feedback means that being able to debug your test code needs to be super easy. We want to give that feedback super quickly, so when something fails, we need to determine immediately, what is this an application bug or is this a bug with our feedback code? This is like my biggest pain point as a test engineer. You need to treat feedback code like feature code. You need to have best practices. You need to be constantly refactoring your code to make it better from a performance standpoint, from a readability standpoint. And you need to unit test your test code, testception. So I've yet to see a smoke test or regression test framework not have custom code written just for it, and yet I never see test engineers using TDD principles to design that custom code. They don't even come back to it later and write unit tests, and yet they're constantly needing to refactor it, and so TDD and unit tests would be very helpful for them, and that's what I feel like everyone should be doing. So this really breaks down into 3 points we take the rate feedback idea and how are we going to apply this to the way Manta does feedback. Smoke, talk, push, those are our 3 points. So smoke, this is really where we kind of went away from the normal testing path in an agile environment. We don't test everything. We don't want to test everything. And we want to test in less than 10 minutes. The goal is to provide really quick, really useful feedback. Like, hey, Dave, your commit 12 minutes ago broke the login functionality. And when Dave says, no, that was Wendy's code, I can be like, Wendy's code came through 26 minutes ago, and it passed, and it's already in staging. I know this is your fault. You need to fix it. That's the kind of feedback that keeps project teams accountable for what they're doing. And maybe that seems like I'm coming on a little strong, but that's the kind of feedback that ultimately leads to quality software. So there are some keys to success, in my mind at least. Obviously, this is how Manta did things. This isn't necessarily going to, you're not going to go to your project team on Monday and be like, this is the way we got to do it. I just want you to take away some ideas and see if you can apply them to your test or your feedback code to make things better for you. So the first key to success in this smoke testing stage is understand unit testing, trust unit testing, and discuss unit testing with the developers who are writing it. Because we don't want to create an overlap when it's unnecessary. There are things that can be tested by unit tests and unit tests alone that are completely valid, and yet so many acceptance test suites or regression test suites are testing those things over again. Why are we doing that? That's just waste. Another key is to use APIs to validate your actions. And what I mean by that is, you're automating an action, you click a button, let's say, and some kind of text pops up, and in the old way, we were validating against that text that would pop up on the UI. Well, that can be mocked, right? The API response can be mocked from a unit or integration testing standpoint by the developers, and they can test that text that pops up. You should click the button and test the API response. And what that leads to is faster feedback because you're going to have less false failures when you don't have to deal with browsers. It's more stable, obviously, and I think it's more valid. You want your smoke testing to be continuously and aggressively integrated. So continuously meaning run on every commit. This testing takes less than 10 minutes, run it against every commit. And aggressively means, you have this pipeline. If something fails, don't continue on with the pipeline. It needs to stop right there and be debugged, and you need to give that feedback immediately. And then, like I said before, key to smoke testing is exploratory testing. You need to have analytical eyes on the application as much as possible. So smoke, talk, push. So talk. Communication is the most important part of software delivery. That's just a fact. You can't deliver quality software without quality communication. And it's even more important in a model that includes continuous delivery. That's kind of just the definition of continuous delivery, is constantly that talk, that feedback, that communication. So some keys to success in our eyes. Pair programming, it's like magic. I can't really explain it. If you may have seen it before. For Manta, it just like clicked and it worked and it immediately led to better code. But don't treat pair programming as just a feature code thing. It's also there for feedback development. So when you're writing your test automation code, pair on that with, test engineer can pair with another test engineer on that, or pair with a developer on that, because they're going to have ideas, or they're going to be able to say, oh, I think maybe we cover that with our integration tests that we write. Found a bug? Communicate that. Don't write it down. Go talk to a developer. Pick up your machine and walk it over to his desk or her desk and say, hey, look at this thing that I found. It's really easy when you're doing the smoke testing thing and that commit that just broke only happened 14 minutes ago. You can say, hey, remember that thing you were working on 14 minutes ago? Well, it sucked. Look. Maybe don't be that mean. I'm just kind of mean. But seriously, how much time do testers and developers and product people waste in something like Quality Center or Jira or whatever bug tracking software you're using? When I'm working with those things, it feels like I'm always in that and I can't, it's like a black hole. I'm in the Quality Center black hole and I want out. I'd rather just talk with somebody. So 3 Amigo sessions, we did that in the old Manta way, but we continued to do it in the smoke, talk, push method too. But don't just limit it to 3, use 4, 5, 6 Amigos, whatever makes sense for your project team and the functionality that you're working on. Pull in everybody and discuss it. The more people to talk about and talk through an issue, the better. And then pairing is not just for development. You can pair test. Jim Holmes' talk earlier, he said, pair for testing, pair for development, pair for everything. I totally agree. Pair for acceptance testing. Sit down with the product owner and walk through that. Developers, testers, whoever, sit down with him or her and do that. Exploratory test with a dev if you're a test engineer. Say, hey, how do you think you could probably break this? Because you probably understand the technical side of this application. I hope you understand the technical side of this application a little bit better than I do. Let's see if you come up with some crazy way to break it. And you say, oh, isn't that a waste of time for more people? Why wouldn't you just have testers do that? Well, because we're moving so quickly, there's more time to do things like exploratory testing, even for developers. So the last part, smoke, talk, push, I almost had to remind myself. Continuous delivery is awesome. It's really fun. The idea is to evaluate and move code as quickly as possible. That's kind of a boiled down version of it. But if you know a commit looks good, why just let it sit in the test environment? That's just another thing to keep track of. It's really easy to keep track of stuff when it moves quickly. That seems counterintuitive, but it's really not. Yeah, like I said, just another thing to track. Don't waste your time tracking things. Make it as easy on yourself as possible. So keys to success there. Treat infrastructure as code. That's kind of that's a key piece of the DevOps movement, right? But it's really important in a continuous delivery model. When you're moving code so often and so quickly through environments, those environments need to be as identical as possible. And any change that you want to make to the production environment should happen in the test environment, should happen in staging or wherever else you have environments. And so if you're going to do that, why not check those changes into GitHub or whatever version control you're using, and why not move them through the pipeline just like you would feature code? Continuously evaluate the build pipeline. So just like you're constantly refactoring your application code, just like I hope you're constantly refactoring your feedback code, you should be trying to constantly make the build pipeline better, make it more efficient, make it more readable in its own way. Hand in hand with that, automatically move code between environments. That's kind of the key piece to continuous delivery. And so this is not really maybe a key to success, but this is something that kind of naturally evolved in the Manta way of doing things, is the test team completely handled deployments. We didn't have a release manager or a release team. Developers didn't have to worry about it. Our DevOps guys gladly handed it over to us. And it really is the thing that made the most sense. We're the ones constantly tracking this application code. We know what's in each environment. We know the status of whether it's good or bad. I hope you're not evaluating it in good or bad just like that, but to boil it down simply. So why not let the test team handle deployments? I'm moving really quickly through this. So if you remember Wild West, this is what it felt like. We were tiptoeing a rocket trying to catch this roadrunner. It was fragile. We had no confidence in it whatsoever. We ran automated scripts, but then we manually tested it too just because we weren't positive that the automation worked. It was ultimately unsustainable, and we felt like every hiccup was a fire. And so that was kind of just a panic-inducing way to work as a project team. The new smoke, talk, push model, yeah, it was pretty great. We saw a lot of benefits. No bug cards, like I said. We went from roughly 1,500 bug cards to 0 bug cards. The only time we ever even considered writing a bug card is if some customer reported an issue to customer service, and they probably wrote a bug card because they didn't have time. They had to take the next call, so they didn't have time to walk it over to the developer and show them the steps to reproduce. They just wrote them down quickly, which ended up in a bug card. But those things were typically turned around in a day because there were issues in production, and we can move that quickly. So yeah, don't write bug cards. Don't waste your time. So we went from the old way, deploying to production once a week. And about a third of that time, we rolled back and said, oh God, what happened there? Why did we get 5,500 responses? So in the new smoke, talk, push model, when I left, we were averaging 3 deployments to production a day. Now, granted, we're a web application. We're not creating like a mobile app, so we're not bombarding users with updates. That would be annoying and wouldn't work for a project team doing that. But that's a lot of pushes to production. And that really testifies to how we felt about the application and our development cycle, right? We definitely would not push to production 3 times a day if we felt like, man, I'm not positive that this is quality software. So yeah, once a week, lots of rollbacks, to 3 times a day, 0 rollbacks. Once we had this smoke, talk, push model into like it was going, I think I left Manta after about 9 months of it solidly being there. I saw 0 rollbacks in that 9 months. And we're talking about every other week at least a rollback because of crazy application breaking code in production. So as you can imagine, a giant benefit of all of this is general confidence in the application. General confidence in the developers and our project team. We felt that confidence internally as a project team, but then outside of that, the business people, the CEO, the marketing team, they felt a whole lot more confident about what we could do. And it was a whole lot more fun to work on a team with that much confidence. It goes from being delivering software like, oh, you want us to do this thing, that seems awfully risky, that'll probably break a lot of code and it'll take a lot of time, maybe we'll do it down the road, to, hey, you want to do this crazy thing, hell yeah, let's try it, let's see what happens. We know we're not going to bust production, we can do this. And that's a whole lot of fun. So some things that I didn't really touch on that are very important to this model. Probably one thing, right, is you heard me say deployments. I didn't say release. So our test team did handle releases as well, but we weren't releasing new features to production 3 times a day. And so what goes with that is feature toggles, right? We had the ability to say, okay, this thing is not turned on in production, but we can push code to production anyway, and we know like some user's not going to discover this busted feature and try to report it as a bug or feel like this is crappy software, I don't want to use Manta ever again. And that was also great because when you do exploratory testing, you can use production for that exploratory testing by toggling on the feature locally just for yourself. In production, use real production data. That's so much more valid, so much more valuable testing for the project team. Okay, so you guys are gonna get out super early. So smoke, talk, push. Feel free to communicate with me. I love communication. I stood up here and said, communicate, communicate, communicate. So feel free to reach out to me on Twitter or email me. That's my cardinal email. We have a whole bunch of time, so ask questions if you have questions now. Sure. Sure. Yeah, so just to restate that question, was you might see some pushback from product people and iteration management. Like, how do we account for developer time when we're not writing in bugs? Like, how do we account for those bugs? It's just kind of built into the cycle in our estimations, right? So you're working on this feature, and I find bug 3, 4, and 5. Like, that's just a part of that feature. And so when we try to estimate that feature, we're estimating, iterating over issues as part of that estimation. And things found, like I said, outside of the iteration, in production, reported by customers or something, that typically does get written as a bug card and then turned around very quickly. We kept points in each iteration for things like that. We knew things would pop up, right? That's inevitable for any project team. And so we want to account for that. So we put a card in to each sprint, like, hey, 4 points for this 2 weeks, because we know we're going to get some crazy request. Does that answer your question? Yeah. Cool. Sure. Jenkins. So we use Jenkins as our continuous integration server. But then we also use Jenkins. We wrote custom code to move it from environment to environment, and that was run. So Jenkins saw, hey, it passed in our test environment. Now we're going to continue the pipeline, push it to the stage environment, and then deploying to production also happened through Jenkins. It was just a few more custom scripts that a test engineer would come in and say, all right, I'm ready to deploy. Push the big green arrow button and write in a little note that we integrated with Slack to say, hey, we've got a deployment going out right now. This is what's being deployed. It probably doesn't have any impact on users, or or it does, whatever we want to write in that little note. Does that answer your question? It's the same exact code. So you want continuous delivery. The idea is like build once, and you work with that one build throughout the whole thing. That's kind of what we felt like was a solid continuous delivery principle for us. Sure.
You had mentioned that you guys backed away from feature branches and that you mostly did work on master. Was that on a per team basis, or when you say master, do you mean like everybody was on master? So did branches go away completely, or were they still being used somehow?
So branches pretty much went away completely. The teams were not broken up. So basically teams were broken between a front-end team and like an API team. But both had the principle of working out of master. So our continuous integration and our continuous delivery was only ever going to happen out of master. So if you worked on a feature branch and you wanted that smoke test run, like it had to be merged into master. We weren't going to try to reconfigure to run on your branch in our environments. So let's see, we had, on want to say like 6 front-end developers and 5 or 6 back-end developers. Then 4 DevOps guys who I would include in that because we were testing their infrastructure stuff, and then 2 test engineers. That was pretty much the entire Manta development team. Any more questions? Good.
You talked about in kind of the slow talk push approach, how you kind of got rid of regression testing. Maybe you touched on it a little bit, but I guess I'd like to hear why you chose to do that and focus on, here are the things that you see as critical to, value right now. Like, why throw out regression testing altogether?
So yeah, that's a good question, and it's often one that's brought up when I tell this little tale, because it goes against what most test engineers feels like their job, right? And the reason we did it is because we wanted to provide really super quick feedback, right? So our acceptance criteria was really small, and we knew it could be done in a couple commits. But if we only provided that feedback after a regression test suite that took 2 hours, like that's not as valuable to them. Like, why work in those tiny little chunks when you're not going to get that feedback for 2 hours anyway? Like, you might as well do more and get like a more whole view of that feature work, right? So if we're going to break the acceptance criteria into such tiny chunks, we needed that feedback to be nearly immediate. And so that's why we felt like only providing the feedback on that super core stuff was so important. Like I said, it's really powerful when you can go up to a developer and say, 12 minutes ago, you broke the login functionality. And ultimately, the developers loved that feedback as well. They felt like it was more valuable too. Anything else? All right, well, feel free to come up and talk to me at any point or tweet at me. And stay for the movie and enjoy it. It's going to be awesome. It's like the whole reason I tried to talk at this thing, so I get a free ticket to this movie. So thank you.
So who is time for a movie? Popcorn, if you go straight up to the left, there is popcorn, there is some sandwiches, there is drinks, all of that thing. In the back of your cart, they have the little Avengers symbol. Those are the screen that